is a 1999 American action-adventure film written and directed by Stephen Sommers, starring Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, John Hannah, and Arnold Vosloo as the reanimated mummy. It is a remake of the 1932 film and part of the larger Universal Monsters franchise. The film follows adventurer and treasure hunter Rick O'Connell as he travels to Hamunaptra, the city of the dead, with librarian Evelyn Conahan and her older brother Jonathan, where they accidentally awaken Imhotep, a cursed high priest with supernatural powers. Development took years, with multiple screenplays and directors attached. In 1997, Sommers successfully pitched his version of a more adventurous and romantic take on the source material. Filming took place in Morocco and the United Kingdom. The crew endured dehydration, sandstorms, and snakes shooting on location in the Sahara Desert. Industrial light and the magic provided many of the visual effects, blending live-action footage and computer-generated imagery to create the titular monster. Jerry Goldsmith composed the orchestral score. The Mummy was theatrically released on May 7, 1999, by Universal Pictures. The film received mixed critical reviews but grossed $422.5 million worldwide against a production budget of $80 million, becoming the sixth highest-grossing film of 1999. The film started a new franchise, with two direct sequels, The Mummy Returns in 2001 and The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor in 2008, and various spin-offs such as an animated series which ran from 2001 to 2003, and the prequel The Scorpion King in 2002, which led to sequels of its own. In 2017, an attempt was made to start another Universal Monsters franchise with The Mummy starring Tom Cruise. In November 2025, a new sequel featuring Fraser and Weisz was announced, to be directed by Mac Bettinelli Olpin and Tyler Gillett of Radio Silence Productions. Plot: in Thebes, Egypt, 1290 BC, the high priest Imhotep has an affair with Pharaoh Seti I's mistress and future bride Anck-Su-Namun. The pair kill the pharaoh after he discovers the pair's transgressions. When the pharaoh's bodyguards, the Medjai, arrive, Anck-Su-Namun takes her own life while Imhotep flees. Imhotep and his priests steal her corpse and travel to Hamunaptra, the city of the dead, to conduct a ritual to resurrect her, but the Medjai intervene. As punishment, Imhotep's priests are mummified alive, while Imhotep himself is cursed and buried alive with flesh-eating scarabs. The Medjai are sworn to prevent Imhotep's return, as his resurrection would grant him immense power. In 1926 AD Cairo, Kingdom of Egypt, Jonathan Conahan presents his sister, Evelyn, a librarian and aspiring Egyptologist working for museum curator Dr. Terence Bey, with an intricate box and map that lead to Hamunaptra, the existence of which is now considered a myth along with the treasures believed to reside there. Jonathan reveals he stole the box from American adventurer and treasure hunter Rick O'Connell, who discovered the city while in the French Foreign Legion 3 years earlier. Evelyn bargains with corrupt prison warden Gad Hassan to free an incarcerated Rick, in exchange for the American leading them to Hamunaptra, where she hopes to find the Golden Book of Ammoniusare, which is believed to be buried inside the statue of Anubis. The group soon finds themselves competing with another expedition, guided by Rick's cowardly fellow former legionnaire Benny Gabor. They are repeatedly intercepted by Medjai, whose leader Ardith Bey cautions them to leave. They ignore Bey's warnings. The two expeditions continue to dig through the ruins, resulting in numerous fatalities that include Hassan being killed by a scarab he inadvertently releases, as well as some workers who are melted by an acid trap that was intentionally left behind to deter future excavation. Both expeditions come into conflict over a statue which is believed to hold the Golden Book. Within the statue of Anubis, however, the competing groups come across the Book of the Dead as well as 5 canopic jars, while Evelyn, Rick, and Jonathan accidentally discover Imhotep's mummified remains. That night, Evelyn steals the Book of the Dead from the rival camp, accidentally awakening the mummified Imhotep when she reads the text contained within. Following a confrontation with the now resurrected Imhotep as well as the Medjai, the expeditions flee back to Cairo. Imhotep spares Benny's life to serve as a translator in exchange for treasure when the mummy realizes that he can speak Hebrew. Imhotep follows the expeditions back to Cairo and unleashes the biblical plagues of Egypt. Those who discovered the Book of the Dead and the 5 canopic jars that preserve Enkidu's vital organs are hunted and killed by Imhotep, restoring his human form and strengthening his power. Attempting to find answers at the museum, the survivors instead find Ardith being hosted by Dr. Bey, a fellow Medjay. The group surmises that Imhotep desires to resurrect Enkidu using Evelyn as a human sacrifice, and that the only way to stop him is to return to Hamunaptra and find the Book of Ammonius-Ra, which is actually buried inside the statue of Horus. The group are soon cornered by Imhotep and a now enthralled city populace, which results in Evelyn's capture while Dr. Bey sacrifices himself to allow the others to escape. The remaining 3 convince Rick's old friend, Royal Air Force Captain Winston Havelock, to fly them to Hamunaptra. Imhotep conjures a magical sandstorm, crashing their plane and killing Havelock. After reaching the city on foot, Rick and Jonathan find the Book of Ammonius-Ra, while Ardith is overwhelmed fighting Imhotep's resurrected servants. Jonathan and Rick reach the ritual chamber, where Rick frees Evelyn, and Jonathan uses the book to control the resurrected servants, leading to the death of a partially resurrected Enkidu. Evelyn then uses the book to make Imhotep mortal, allowing Rick to fatally impale him. Imhotep decomposes back to his mummified form as he sinks into a pool of liquid, swearing vengeance in the process. Meanwhile, Benny, who had been pilfering treasure from Hamunaptra, inadvertently triggers a booby trap, causing the city to start collapsing. Rick, Evie, and Jonathan escape while Benny is buried inside and devoured by scarabs. Outside, the group discover Ardith survived, and he bids them farewell as they depart, unknowingly with some of Benny's plundered loot. Cast. See also, List of the Mummy, film series, characters. Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz star in the film as Rick O'Connell and Evelyn Carnahan. Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell. Rachel Weisz as Evelyn Carnahan. John Hannah as Jonathan Carnahan. Arnold Vosloo as Imhotep. Kevin J. O'Connor as Benny Gabor. Jonathan Hyde as Dr. Alan Chamberlain. Oded Fair as Ardith Bey. Eric Avari as Dr. Terence Bey. Stephen Dunham as Isaac Henderson. Corey Johnson as David Daniels. Tuc Watkins as Bernard Burns. Omid Jalili as Warden Gad Hassan. Aaron Ipale as Pharaoh Seti. Bernard Fox as Captain Winston Havelock. Patricia Velasquez as Enkidu. Kyle Chase as Hook, a one-handed member of the Medjay. Muhammad Afifi as Hangman. Abderrahim Al-Adalai as Camel Guide. Production. Development. In the late 1980s, the producers James Jacks and Sean Daniel decided to update the 1932 horror film The Mummy for the modern era. 6. Universal gave them the go-ahead, but only if they kept the budget around $10 million. 7. Jacks remembers that the studio essentially wanted a low-budget horror franchise. 7. In 1987, George A. Romero wrote a film treatment and was attached to direct. Screenwriter Abby Bernstein recalled that Universal wanted an unstoppable mummy akin to the Terminator. Bernstein's story took place in the present, scientists inadvertently bring a mummy to life, who wants to use an ancient device to destroy all life on Earth. The mummy had no more social interaction than the Tyrannosaurus did in Jurassic Park, Bernstein recalled. Romero drifted away from the project and the script was abandoned. 8/29. Next, Jacques and Daniel recruited horror filmmaker/writer Clive Barker to direct after his success with Hellraiser, 1987. Barker's 1990 treatment and a successive 1991 screenplay by Mick Garris were dark and violent, with the story revolving around an art museum that rebuilds an entire Egyptian tomb in Beverly Hills. 6/9/8/29. Jacques recalls that Barker's take was dark, sexual, and filled with mysticism, 7, and that it would have been a great low-budget movie. 9. Barker recalled the concept was too weird for the studio, and that his vision treated the mummy as a jumping-off point for the film instead of the central character. 8/30. Alan Ormsby, unaware of previous efforts to launch the film, was brought on next. He pitched a more straightforward update to the 1932 film, again focusing on the mummy as a relentless Terminator-like character. Joe Dante was attached as director, increasing the budget for his idea of Daniel Day-Lewis as a brooding mummy. 7. This version's draft was later rewritten by John Sayles. It was set in contemporary times and focused on reincarnation with elements of a love story. 9. It came close to being made, with some elements like the flesh-eating scarabs making it to the final product. 6. But Universal balked at the higher price tag. 8/30. Romero returned to the project 7 years later in 1994, 8/30, with a vision of a zombie-style horror film similar to Night of the Living Dead, 1968, but which also relied heavily upon elements of tragic romance and ambivalence of identity. Romero completed a draft in October 1994, co-written with Ormsby and Sayles, that revolved around a female archaeologist named Helen Rover and her discovery of the tomb of Imhotep, an Egyptian general who lived in the time of Ramesses II. 7, unfolding in a nameless American city in modern times. Events are set into motion when Imhotep inadvertently awakens as a result of his body having been exposed to rays from an MRI scan in a high-tech forensic archaeology lab. 7. Helen finds herself drawn into a tentative relationship with Imhotep while also experiencing clairvoyant flashbacks to a previous life in the 19th dynasty of Egypt as a priestess of Isis. Summoning mystical powers through incantation, Imhotep later resurrects the mummy of Keris, a loyal slave. Keris embarks on a vengeful rampage against the grave robbers of his tomb. Romero's script was considered too dark and violent by Jacques and the studio, who wanted a more accessible picture. Romero was unable to extricate himself from another contract he had in negotiation with MGM, and so his involvement with the film was severed and the development of an entirely new script was commissioned. 7. Garris returned in 1995, developing a script that combined elements of the 1932 film and 1942's The Mummy's Tomb. This draft was a period piece awash in Egyptian art-inspired Art Deco, but the vision once again proved too expensive for the studio and was discarded for a modern setting. While the project came close to entering production, Universal was sold to Seagram. Sheinberg chose to produce The Mummy through his independent company and write a new script. Unable to find a suitable high-profile writer and director, Wes Craven was offered, but he turned it down. 9. The project unraveled again and Garris left the project for the second time. 8/30-31, 10. Still determined to create a new mummy film, Universal hired Kevin Jarre in 1996 to write a new screenplay. According to Jacques, the executives were now convinced the film should be a larger budget period piece. 31. Stephen Sommers called Jacques and Daniel in 1997 with his vision of The Mummy as a kind of Indiana Jones or Jason and the Argonauts, with the mummy as the creature giving the hero a hard time. 7. Summers had seen the original film when he was 8 and wanted to recreate the things he liked about it on a bigger scale. 11. Discussing other classic horror characters, Summers recalled, "That Frankenstein made me sad. I always felt sorry for him. Dracula was kind of cool and sexy. But the mummy just plain scared me." He had wanted to make a mummy film, but other writers or directors were always attached. 1252. After the box office failure of Babe, Pig in the City, 1998, among others, Universal needed a hit film. At the time, Universal's management had changed in response to the box office failures, and the losses led the studio to revisit its successful franchises from the 1930s. 13. New chair. Stacy Snyder distributed packets detailing the studio's holdings, including nearly 5,000 old scripts and films. 14. 156. Summers received his window of opportunity and pitched his money to Universal with an 18-page treatment. 6. Summers did not want to remake the original film. He described the original as a horror film, while his adaptation would be more of a romantic adventure horror movie. 1253. Summers incorporated his own research and the services of a UCLA archaeology professor to make the ancient Egyptian language accurate. 827. Snyder recalled that Summers' treatment was unique in that it took place in the 1920s, rather than a contemporary setting. 15. Universal liked the treatment so much that they approved the concept and increased the budget. 16. Hay and Summers spent a year working on the screenplay. 18. 103. Casting. Jacks offered the role of Rick O'Connell to Tom Cruise, who was later cast in the reboot film. Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, and Ben Affleck, but the actors were not interested or could not fit the role into their respective schedules. 7. Jacks and Summers were impressed with George of the Jungle's box office earnings and cast Brendan Fraser as a result. Wink with a frown. 7. Summers also commented that he felt Fraser fit the Errol Flynn swashbuckling character he had envisioned for Rick perfectly. 15. Fraser's role in George bolstered his perceived star power, yet he remained far cheaper than the biggest actors working. 14. 155. Fraser understood that his character doesn't take himself too seriously, otherwise the audience can't go on that journey with him. 19. Evelyn Carnahan was named in tribute to Lady Evelyn Herbert, the daughter of amateur Egyptologist Lord Carnarvon, both present at the opening of the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922. 20. The studio originally considered American actresses, and Rachel Weisz auditioned multiple times before getting the part. 17. Weisz was not a big fan of horror films, but saw the movie as more of a wholesome comic book. 21. John Hannah was picked for the role of Jonathan Carnahan, despite the fact that Hannah felt he was not a comedic actor, with Summers saying that he had no idea why we cast him. 17. Jacks had previously produced Hard Target, 1993, with Arnold Vosloo. The South African actor liked the Mummy script but told Summers he wanted to play the role absolutely straight. From Imhotep's point of view, this is a skewed version of Romeo and Juliet. 7. 22. He was offered the role after a single audition. 8. 27. Carrying some extra weight and conscious of it because of Imhotep's skimpy costume, Vosloo lost 10 to 15 pounds for the role by eschewing alcohol and sugar. 8. 28. Filming. Principal photography began on May 4, 1998, and lasted 17 weeks. 23. The crew was unable to shoot in Egypt due to unstable political conditions, so filming began in Marrakesh, Morocco. 24. Marrakesh had the extra advantage of being much less modern than Cairo, making it easier to dress like the 1920s. The production set up 2 weeks before filming, taking down telephone wires and cables and shipping in period cars and camels. 27 locals served as extras for crowd scenes. 116 After shooting in Marrakesh, filming moved to the Sahara Desert outside the small town of Irfoud. Production designer Alan Cameron found a geologic feature, Gara Menewa, where the exteriors for Hamunaptra could be constructed. 23. A concrete ramp was built to allow access into the horseshoe-shaped formation, when the city was built from prefabricated parts shipped from England. 23, 18, 25, 26, 103. A survey of the area was conducted so that an accurate model and scale models of the columns and statues could be replicated back at Shepperton Studios, where all of the scenes involving the underground passageways of the City of the Dead were shot. These sets took 16 weeks to build and included fiberglass columns rigged with special effects for the movie's final scenes. 23. To avoid dehydration in the scorching heat of the Sahara, the production's medical team created a drink that the cast and crew had to consume every 2 hours. 19. Sandstorms were daily inconveniences, and wildlife were a major problem, with many crew members having to be airlifted to medical care after being bitten or stung. 24. Fraser nearly died during a scene where his character is hanged. 21. The production had the official support of the Royal Moroccan Army, and the cast members had kidnapping insurance taken out on them. 9. After shooting in North Africa, production moved back to the United Kingdom before completion on August 29, 1998. 23. Here, the dockyards at Chatham double for the Giza port on the Nile River. 27. This set was 600 feet, 183 meters, in length and featured a steam train, an Ajax traction engine, 3 cranes, an open 2-horse carriage, 4 horse-drawn carts, 5 dressing horses and grooms, 9 packed donkeys and mules, as well as market stalls, Arab-clad vendors and room for 300 costumed extras. 23. Special effects. The filmmakers reportedly spent $15 million of the budget on special effects alone. 28. The Mummy features hundreds of shots that required optical or digital special effects in post-production. Effects House Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, contributed more than 140 shots, with additional work done by Cinesite, 60 shots, and Pacific Tile/Mirage, 45 shots, and the film's title sequences. 29. 60 Summers engaged ILM while still developing the script, having previously worked with ILM effects supervisor John Burton on Deep Rising, 1998. ILM was eager for the challenge the film provided and produced a proof of concept for the Mummy's effects in late 1997 to demonstrate the feasibility of Summers' vision to executives. 103. The filmmakers sought to make something faster and scarier for the title creature, using cutting-edge techniques to create something never before seen. ILM started developing the look of the Mummy 3 months before filming started. 23. We wanted to create a photorealistic corpse that was obviously not a man in a suit, obviously not an animatronic, and obviously alive, he recalled. 8. Over a months-long period, the designers worked on developing 4 distinct stages for the Mummy. Stage 1 was the Mummy at its most decayed, with tattered bits of clothing, skin, and sinew hanging over a skeleton. Stage 2 added areas of regenerated skin, with stages 3 and 4 having the Mummy almost fully regenerated with only small areas of its innards showing through. The artists developed black and white sketches, then moved on to color treatments before building the creature in the computer. Models were also made to use as reference for the digital artists. 103. The initial states of the Mummy were created entirely by computer, while later stages combined live-action performance. To supplement prosthetics and makeups applied on set, LED lights and pieces of tape served as tracking points so that digital cutouts could be applied to Voslow's face and body in post-production. Wink with a frown. 2961 Voslow remarked that walking around the set he felt like a Christmas tree. 15. The final creature was created with a combination of live-action acting with prosthetics and digital imagery. 1255 A digital representation of the mummy was created in Alias, featuring simulated muscles for much of the body attached to a skeleton. 2960 The animators controlled parts of the mummy via procedural animation. Animating the underlying bones in turn controlled the stretch and movement of the overlaid muscles. Finally, layered on top of the procedural animation and motion capture was additional animation to tweak the performance. Given the limitations of the technology, subtle movements like facial or hand animations had to be done by hand. 2961 Shots that featured Voslow with overlaid computer-generated prosthetics were the most difficult for the effects team, requiring careful match moving. 114 Rather than using a stunt performer, Voslow performed the motion capture for the character himself. 2961 Scenes were blocked out and performed on set during principal photography, first with Voslow in the scene, then without. The shots were then replicated in the motion capture studio, with Voslow's performance recorded by 8 cameras from different angles. 111. In addition to the mummy, the script called for numerous effects shots to magnify the sweeping adventure of the film. Vistas like a flashback shot of the ancient city of Thebes combine location footage shot in the desert with composited actors shot on green screen, model miniatures, matte paintings, and computer-generated effects. 115 The plagues Imhotep unleashes were accomplished using particle-based computer graphics, with ILM designers swapping out models of different qualities depending on how far from the camera the swarming insects were. 29 While the film made extensive use of computer-generated imagery, many scenes, including ones where Rachel Weisz's character is covered with rats and locusts, were shot using live animals. 24 Another close-up shot used footage of anesthetized locusts attached to a stunt performer combined with extra computer-generated pests. 116 Sandstorms used procedural graphics based on programs used to create tornadoes in Twister, while the masses of flesh-eating scarabs used techniques developed for Star Wars, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. 115 27 A shot of a firestorm engulfing Cairo combined real palm trees, physical models, and matte paintings with computer-generated hail, fire, and rubble. Pacific Tile/Mirage also enhanced shots with digital camera shake. 2964. The finale involves an army of mummies coming to Imhotep's defense. Many of these mummies were created by makeup effects supervisor Nick Dudman, who produced makeup, prosthetics, and animatronic effects in the film. 24. Each suit came with variations for stunt moves or pyrotechnics. After principal photography, the suits were sent to ILM to scan and be modeled in the computer. Using parts of the Imhotep mummy to save time, ILM recreated the underlings digitally to add into the scenes and used motion capture to animate them. The animators credited Fraser's ability to consistently reenact his movements in multiple takes as saving time when it came to match the motion-captured digital mummies to the live-action fight scenes. 118 to 199. Music. Further information: The Mummy, 1999 soundtrack. The score for The Mummy was composed and conducted by Jerry Goldsmith, with orchestrations provided by Alexander Courage. 30. Goldsmith had previously scored Deep Rising for Summers. As he reached the final few years of his career, Goldsmith was coming off a number of action and adventure films in the 1990s, from multiple Star Trek films to Air Force One, 1997. Goldsmith provided The Mummy with suitably bombastic music, with the traditional European orchestra supplemented with regional instruments such as the bouzouki, 31. The opening of the film contains nearly all of Goldsmith's major themes for the score, with what music critic Jeff Bond calls an Egyptian theme, reused in different configurations throughout to establish the epic settings and sense of place for Haminaptra, a theme for Imhotep/the Mummy that is performed in an understated manner early in the film, before repeating in more forceful, brassy renditions after the mummy has regenerated, a love theme used for both Imhotep/Inksunamen and Rick/Evelyn, and a heroic theme for Rick, 31. In addition to the extensive brass and percussion elements, the score uses sparing amounts of vocals, unusual for much of Goldsmith's work, 32. The soundtrack was released by Decca Records on May 4, 1999. Overall, Goldsmith's score was well received. AllMusic described it as a grand, melodramatic score, which delivered the expected highlights. 30. Other reviews positively noted the dark, percussive sound meshed well with the plot, as well as the raw power of the music. The limited but masterful use of the chorus was also lauded, and most critics found the final track on the CD to be the best overall. 32. 33. On the other hand, some critics found the score lacked cohesion, 34, and that the constant heavy action lent itself to annoying repetition, 32. Roderick Scott of cinemusic.net summed up the score as representative of both Goldsmith's absolute best and his most mediocre. Thankfully, his favorable work on this release wins out. 33. Release. Test audiences reacted poorly to the film's title, which conjured up negative impressions of an old horror film, but domestic marketing president Mark Schrioga recalled that they decided, "We would redefine the myth with the film, rather than change the title." 15. Enthusiasm for the film was low, but Universal took out a television spot for the Super Bowl, reportedly costing $1.6 million. 15. That Summers recalled immediately reversed the discussion of the film's prospects. 17. The producers were concerned that the imminent release of The Phantom Menace would sink the film's box office fortunes, resulting in them moving the release date from May 21 to 7, 15, 14, 157. Home media. The Mummy was released on home video in VHS and DVD formats on September 28, 1999. 35. The film was a tremendous success for Universal on home video, selling 7 million units on VHS and 1 million on DVD, making it the year's best-selling live-action VHS and second best-selling DVD, behind The Matrix. The Mummy's performance helped Universal gross over $1 billion in home video sales. 36. On April 24, 2001, a two-disc Ultimate Edition DVD of the film premiered to coincide with the release of The Mummy Returns. 37. The film was later digitally remastered and received a Blu-ray release in 2008. 38. It was subsequently re-released on 4K Ultra HD in 2017 as both a standalone film and in a trilogy pack with its sequels. 39. Better source needed. Reception. Box office. The Mummy was the #1 film in the United States and Canada on its opening weekend, grossing $43 million in 3,210 theaters. Its weekend take was the highest non-holiday day opening, and 9th biggest opening of all time, 41. The film later fell to second place behind The Phantom Menace. The Mummy grossed over $155.4 million in the United States and Canada and $261 million internationally, grossing over $418.1 million worldwide. 3. Critical response. The Mummy received mixed reviews from critics. 41. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 63% based on 106 reviews, and an average rating of 5.9 out of 10. The website's consensus reads, "It's difficult to make a persuasive argument for The Mummy as any kind of meaningful cinematic achievement, but it's undeniably fun to watch." 42. On Metacritic, the film has a score of 48 out of 100 based on 34 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. 43. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B on an A+ to F scale. 44. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film a positive review, writing, "There is hardly a thing I can say in its favor, except that I was cheered by nearly every minute of it. I cannot argue for the script, the direction, the acting or even the Mummy, but I can say that I was not bored and sometimes I was unreasonably pleased." 45. Critics such as Entertainment Weekly's Owen Gleiberman and the New York Times' Stephen Holden concurred with the sentiment of the film as a breezy crowd-pleaser. 46, 47, 48. Less positively, Keith Phipps of the AV Club wrote that the film's attempt to create a big, Indiana Jones-inspired action film felt forced, and the result was unsatisfying. 49. Other reviews complained of an overstuffed plot or recycled elements from better movies. 50, 47. Reviewers comparing the film to the 1932 original sometimes favored the original's focus on atmosphere and dread. 50, though others welcomed the change to a more energetic Indiana Jones-type film. 51. The effects were generally praised, especially the title creature. 52. Ernest Lawson's review for Jump Cut felt that the effects were too similar to ILN's other work, and that the effects alone could not support the weight of the rest of the movie. 53. Bob Graham of the San Francisco Chronicle and Hal Hinson from the Dallas Observer agreed that the effects never overshadowed the human aspects of the film. 52. 54. Gleiberman said that the horrors of the effects were undercut by the lightheartedness of the film, while the BBC's Almar Haflidason felt that the effects were occasionally unconvincing, and the heavy reliance on cutting-edge computer-generated imagery would likely date the film heavily as time passed. The Mummy's box office performance led to numerous sequels and spin-offs. The film's sequel, The Mummy Returns, 2001, features most of the surviving principal characters. As a married couple, Rick and Evelyn confront Imhotep and the Scorpion King. 75. The film also introduces the hero's son, Alex. 75. A second sequel, The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, 2008, takes place in China with the Terracotta Emperor inspiring the villain, and Rachel Weisz replaced with Maria Bello. The films inspired an animated TV series titled The Mummy, which lasted 2 seasons, 78, and a spin-off prequel, The Scorpion King, 2002. 79. Universal announced plans in 2012 to reboot the franchise. Wink with the Frown. 80. A reboot film, also titled The Mummy, was released in June 2017 to poor critical and box office performance. 81. Developer Konami Nagoya published 2 video game adaptations of The Mummy under license from Universal Interactive Studios. In 2000, an action-adventure game for the PlayStation and Microsoft Windows developed by Rebellion Developments. 82. As well as a Game Boy Color puzzle game. 83. There was also a 2002 video game based on the 2001 animated series, published by Ubisoft for Game Boy Advance. 84. The film also inspired a roller coaster, Revenge of the Mummy, found in 3 Universal Studios theme parks, Hollywood, California, Orlando, Florida, and Sentosa, Singapore. 85. Characters of the film are featured in Funko Fusion, released in 2024. In 2025, Variety reported that Fraser and Weisz would reunite for another film sequel to The Mummy. The superhero film is a film genre categorized by the presence of superhero characters, individuals with extraordinary abilities who are dedicated to fighting crime, saving the world, or helping the innocent. It is sometimes considered a subgenre of the action film genre and has evolved into one of the most financially successful film genres worldwide. These films focus on superhuman abilities, advanced technology, mystical phenomena, or exceptional physical and mental skills that enable these heroes to fight for the common good or defeat a supervillain antagonist. Superhero films typically include genre elements of romance, comedy, fantasy, and science fiction, with large instances of the superhero genre predominantly occupied and produced by American media franchises DC and Marvel, originally adaptations of their existing works of superhero comic books. 1. 2. Individual superhero films frequently contain a character's origin story. 3. Between 1941 and 1942, Fleischer Studios produced a series of 8 animated cartoons and 1 additional short based on the Superman comic book. 6. Famous Studios, the successor of Fleischer Studios, created 8 more cartoons between 1942 and 1943. In the following decades, the decline of Saturday matinee showings of serials and turmoil in the comic book industry slowed superhero motion picture production greatly, although films were still being produced. These films included Superman and the Mole Men, 1951, starring George Reeves, and Batman, 1966, a big-screen extension of the Batman television series starring Adam West. Superman and the Mole Men was a pilot for the TV series Adventures of Superman. Compilations of the series were later released theatrically. In 1957, Shinto Ho produced the first film serial featuring the tokusatsu superhero character Supergiant, marking a shift in Japanese popular culture toward masked superheroes in tokusatsu. The Supergiant film series and Astro Boy heavily influenced later Japanese tokusatsu superhero films. 10. Moonlight Mask also became popular around that time, with 6 films retelling the story of the TV series. 11. Another early Japanese superhero film was Oganda, 1966, starring Sonny Chiba, based on the 1931 Kamishibai superhero Oganda. Although kaiju movies, or movies featuring kaiju monsters, do not typically fall under the superhero category, the kaiju monster Godzilla, originally a villain, transitioned into a superhero role in subsequent films. 13. Godzilla has been described as the original radioactive superhero, because his nuclear origin story predates Spider-Man's 1962 debut. 13. However, Godzilla did not become a hero until Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, 1964. 14. By the 1970s, Godzilla was viewed as a superhero, with the magazine King of the Monsters describing Godzilla in 1977 as the superhero of the 70s. Donald F. Glubb wrote that Godzilla was the most universally popular superhero of 1977. 1966 saw the debut of the Ultra series with the Kaiju TV show Ultra Q. With the release of the original Ultraman, the franchise started focusing on superheroes, and the series averaged an audience rating of 36.8% through its first 39 episodes. 16. In 1967, Ultraman started expanding to films. Early films, such as Ultraman, Monster Movie Feature, were compilations or theatrical releases of TV show episodes. The first original Ultraman film was The Six Ultra Brothers vs. the Monster Army, a co-production with Thailand. 17. The popularity of television superheroes in Japan led to the Kamen Rider and Super Sentai franchises by manga artist Shotaro Ishinomori in 1971 and 1975, respectively. As with Ultraman, many early Kamen Rider and Super Sentai episodes were released as films. Original Kamen Rider films released before 1978 include Kamen Rider vs. Shocker, Kamen Rider vs. Ambassador Hao, Kamen Rider V3 vs. Destron Mutants, and Five Riders vs. Team Dark, 18. Original superhero characters emerged in other, more comedy-oriented films, such as the French political satire film Mr. Freedom, 1969, the Polish parody Hydrozygatka, 1970, and the American B-movies Rap Finka Boo Boo, 1966, and The Wild World of Batwoman, 1966. Following the success of Star Wars, Richard Donner's Superman, 1978, the first big-budget DC feature film, was a critical and commercial success. 21. The same year, Toei Company's Spider-Man reimagining and the first Super Sentai crossover film, J-Kikyu Denjekatide vs. Goranger, were released. Other entries emerged throughout the 1980s, including 8 Riders vs. Galaxy King, 1980, Kamen Rider Super 1, the movie, 1981, Richard Lester's Superman 2, 1981, Spider-Man, The Dragon's Challenge, 1981, and Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop, 1987. These were followed by Kamen Rider Black, Hurry to Onigashima, and Kamen Rider Black, Terrifying. The Phantom House of Devil Pass, released in 1988. The success of Tim Burton's Batman, 1989, and its direct follow-up, Batman Returns, 1992, spawned the DC animated universe. Alex Proyas the Crow, 1994, became the first independent comic superhero franchise film. 24. The film introduced a new level of violence to a younger audience, bridging the gap between superhero and modern action films. 25. The success of The Crow may have influenced the release of a film version of Spawn, 1997, Image Comics' leading character. After Marvel bought Malibu Comics, which owned the Men in Black comic series, Marvel and Columbia Pictures released Men in Black in 1997. 26. This film was the first Marvel property to win an Academy Award and, at the time, was the highest-grossing comic book adaptation. 27. While commercially successful, Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin, 1997, was critically panned for its campiness. 28. And deviation from the darker style of the series' first 2 films directed by Tim Burton. 29. Some have cited it as a factor in the temporary decline of the superhero film subgenre. In 1998, Marvel released Blade, a darker superhero film blended with traditional action elements. The title character possesses the powers of a vampire and an arsenal of weaponry. The success of Blade is considered the beginning of Marvel's film success and a catalyst for further comic book film adaptations. Blade 2 was released in 2002. Adam Sternberg of Vulture stated that The Matrix, 1999, was influenced by comic books, cyberpunk fiction, Japanese anime, and Hong Kong action films. He also credits the film and its incorporation of computer-generated imagery, CGI, with reinventing the superhero film by setting the template for modern superhero blockbusters. According to Sternberg, this inspired the superhero renaissance in the early 21st century. 36. John Kenneth Mua, in the Encyclopedia of Superheroes on Film and Television, describes The Matrix as a reimagination of movie visuals, paving the way for the visuals of later superhero films. He credits it with helping to make comic book superheroes hip. He notes that the bullet time effect successfully demonstrates the concept of faster than a speeding bullet on screen. 37. In Japan, Following the success of the Kamen Rider Kuga television series, a new era of the Kamen Rider franchise began, leading to the production of annual Kamen Rider movies, starting with Kamen Rider Ajido, Project G4 in 2001, 38. The popularity of the Ultraman Tiga TV series led to several films based on it in later installments, including Ultraman Tiga and Ultraman Dyna, Warriors of the Star of Light, 1998, Ultraman Gaia, The Battle in Hyperspace, 1999, and Ultraman Tiga, The Final Odyssey, 2000. The release of Iron Man in 2008 began the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU. A few months later, The Dark Knight was released to widespread critical acclaim and became the first superhero movie to make over $1 billion at the worldwide box office. 39. 2009 saw the release of Watchmen and X-Men Origins, Wolverine. The 2010s saw continued success for superhero films both culturally and economically. 40. Taking the subgenre's success and ubiquity to new heights. 41. Matthew Vaughn's adaptation of Kick-Ass was released in 2010, followed by Iron Man 2 a month later. 2011 releases included The Green Hornet, 42, Green Lantern, and X-Men, First Class. After referencing the Avengers Initiative in the Iron Man films and The Incredible Hulk, Marvel released Thor in May 2011, 43, followed by Captain America, the First Avenger in July 2011, 44. While Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance, 2012, had little audience interest, 45, 3 superhero films made it to the top 10 in the box office chart for the year, both in the US, 46, and internationally, 47. These were The Avengers, May 2012, The Dark Knight Rises, July 2012, and The Amazing Spider-Man, July 2012. A Superman Returns sequel was planned for 2009 but was delayed and later scrapped in favor of Man of Steel, 2013, a reboot of the Superman franchise. At the 2012 San Diego Comic-Con, Marvel confirmed an Ant-Man movie was in development, as well as a film based on the 2008 comic book series Guardians of the Galaxy, which was released in August 2014. Iron Man 3 was released in May 2013, Thor: The Dark World in November 2013, and Captain America: The Winter Soldier in April 2014. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, the sequel to the 2012 reboot, was released in May 2014. A sequel to the 2009 film X-Men Origins, Wolverine, titled The Wolverine, was released in 2013. In 2014, X-Men: Days of Future Past was released. In 2014, Italian filmmaker Gabriele Salvatore's directed a superhero fantasy film titled Il Ragazzo Invisible, The Invisible Boy, which won the Young Audience Award at the 2015 European Film Awards, 48. 2015 to 2018. An Avengers sequel, titled Avengers: Age of Ultron, was released in May 2015. Following the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, rival DC also planned to make and produce their own shared film universe called the DC Extended Universe, DCU, which tied back to the release of Man of Steel in 2013. A sequel titled Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice was scheduled for release in May 2016 but was postponed to March 2016. The SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, a 2015 Nickelodeon film, features the main characters transforming into superheroes. 20th Century Fox rebooted the Fantastic Four series and released Fantastic Four in August 2015, 49. On March 9, 2015, publishing house Valiant Comics made a 9-figure deal with Chinese company DMG Entertainment to produce their series of superhero movies set in their cinematic universe. 50. The series was co-produced by Sony Pictures and started with the movie adaptation of Bloodshot for a 2020 release, followed by Harbinger, both movies receiving a sequel and ending in a crossover movie based on the Harbinger Wars arc from the comic books. 51. In 2015, Italian filmmaker Gabriele Minetti directed the superhero film They Call Me Geek starring Claudio Santamaria. 52. Its original title is Lo chiamavano Geek Roba, from the Italian name of the anime and manga series Steel Geek. That was released in Italy on February 25, 2016. 53. The eighth installment in the X-Men series, Deadpool, was released in February 2016. It became the highest-grossing R-rated film of all time, when adjusted for inflation, and the highest-grossing film of the series. The ninth installment, X-Men: Apocalypse, was released in May. Warner Bros. Released Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, the first film to feature both Batman and Superman, in March 2016. Suicide Squad, released in August, featured a team of anti-hero/supervillains. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and Suicide Squad are in the DCU. In May 2016, Marvel Studios released Captain America: Civil War, where the Avengers split into opposing factions. In October, Max Steel, based on Mattel's eponymous toy line, was released. 54. In November of the same year, Marvel Studios released Doctor Strange, which recounts the superhero origin of Stephen Strange. The first Finnish superhero film, Rendell, Dark Vengeance, was released in September 2017, and it won the Best Action Movie award at the Euratom Film Festival in Mexico. 55. Power Rangers, a movie reboot of the TV series, was released in March, with Lionsgate planning a 7-film franchise. The film Logan, which was Hugh Jackman's and Patrick Stewart's last appearances as their characters in the X-Men film series before Disney acquired 20th Century Fox, was the first ever canon X-Men movie to be rated R and the first superhero movie to receive an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. In the summer movie season, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Wonder Woman, and Spider-Man: Homecoming confirmed the superhero film domination in the mainstream movie market. 56. That trend continued into the fall with the success of Thor: Ragnarok. Due to this, Warner Bros. Attempted to have a shared universe media franchise, the DCU, with Justice League, though this was poorly received and a box office disappointment. 57. 58. In February 2018, Marvel Studios released Black Panther, featuring the solo film adaptation of the first mainstream African-American superhero, the Black Panther, a commercial and critical success in the MCU franchise. It became the first superhero film nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture. 59. This MCU project was soon followed up by Avengers: Infinity War, released in April 2018, which earned both critical acclaim, 60, and worldwide financial success, earning more than $2 billion, 61. Soon after, 20th Century Fox released Deadpool 2 in May 2018, 62. In addition, Incredibles 2's wide release in June 2018 was met with considerable critical acclaim, 63, and earned $182.68 million during its premiere weekend, 64. The next superhero film in the MCU, Ant-Man and the Wasp, was released on July 6. The anti-hero film Venom, based on the comic book character of the same name, was released in October 2018 to poor reviews but box office success. In December 2018, Warner Bros. Released Aquaman, a film about the DC Comics superhero of the same name, marking a box office success for the DCU, grossing $1.152 billion worldwide, 65. 2019, present. Marvel's Captain Marvel was released in March 2019 and faced online hostility, originating from star Brie Larson's comments about the lack of diversity in the film and film criticism industries. 66. Despite the controversy, it earned over $1 billion worldwide. 67. And received largely positive reviews. 68. Later in April, the DCU's Shazam, featuring the lead character who was previously known as Captain Marvel, had decent box office success for a relatively low budget. 69, which has been seen as further evidence of the revitalization of the Warner Bros. Media franchise. That same month, Avengers: Endgame ended the Infinity Saga to widespread acclaim, broke numerous box office records, and became the fastest film to exceed $1 billion worldwide, doing so in just 5 days. Avengers: Endgame became the highest-grossing film of all time, surpassing James Cameron's Avatar before the latter reclaimed its place in 2021, 71. By contrast, the X-Men film Dark Phoenix performed poorly, critically and financially, upon release in June, 72. This would be the last film in 20th Century Fox's X-Men series. Afterwards, X-Men and the Fantastic Four entered the MCU with Disney's acquisition of 20th Century Fox. However, neither franchise would receive a standalone film in the MCU until 2024's Deadpool and Wolverine, and 2025's The Fantastic Four: First Steps. 73. In July 2019, Phase 3 of the MCU was concluded with the Marvel and Sony co-produced film Spider-Man: Far From Home, which was released to critical and commercial success. 74. 75. In August 2019, Joko Anwar's Gundala was released in Indonesia. 76. It screened at the Toronto International Film Festival in September. It also took the first entry in the Bom-Langdit Cinematic Universe, BCU, film series based on characters from comic books published by Bom-Langdit. 77. The second and third films in the series, Sriya Sai and Patriot Tharuna, Virgo and the Sparklings, were announced for a 2020 release but were pushed back to 2021 as the COVID-19 pandemic significantly delayed production. 78. The production company's strategy of announcing films in volumes with a team-up film as the climax has led to the media dubbing it the Indonesian equivalent to the MCU and DCU. 79. The Suicide Squad was released in August but was a box office disappointment despite receiving positive reviews. The poor performance was attributed to the disruption of cinema during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly the Delta variant, and confusion from the general audience on whether the film was a sequel, reboot, or remake. 80. 81. Meanwhile, Marvel's Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings broke Labor Day records. 82. While similar successes were seen in Sony's Spider-Man universe, SSU, film Venom, Let There Be Carnage. 83. Despite mediocre reviews and the first Rotten rating, 84, for an MCU film. On Rotten Tomatoes, Eternals opened to moderate success at the box office. 85. Spider-Man: No Way Home was released in December 2021 and became the highest-grossing film of 2021. 86. The highest-grossing film of all time. 87. The third highest-grossing film in the United States and Canada. 88. The highest-grossing Spider-Man film, and the highest-grossing film produced by Sony. 89. It also became the first film to gross over $1 billion since Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 90. As well as the highest-grossing film not to be released in China, one of the world's biggest box office markets. 91. In 2022, Warner Bros. Released The Batman, a reboot of the Batman film series, unconnected to the DC Extended Universe. It was a critical and commercial hit, with praise for the film being a grounded detective story, 92, due to Matt Reeves' direction and Robert Pattinson's performance as the titular hero, 93. It became the second biggest pandemic debut, after Spider-Man: No Way Home, 94, Morbius, starring Jared Leto and based on the Spider-Man villain of the same name, debuted that April as another chapter in Sony's Spider-Man universe. The film was critically panned and a box office bomb, 95. Variety reported that whilst the initial opening was hopeful for Morbius, the character is not nearly as recognizable to general audiences as Spider-Man, Batman, or Venom, nor is the film connected to a larger story like Eternals or Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Thus, Morbius wasn't expected to match the receipts for recent comic book tentpoles based on those characters. 96. Scott Mendelson further stated Sony seemed to rely on the film's connection to the Spider-Man universe, the success of Venom, and a misguided assumption that audiences were interested in villain movies. 97. In May 2022, Sam Raimi returned to the superhero genre with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The film was met with mixed to positive reviews and earned $187 million on its opening weekend. It became the 11th best domestic debut of all time, the best summer debut for a Disney release during the pandemic, and Raimi's best opening, 98. The film earned $61 million in its second weekend, becoming one of the MCU's most significant second weekend box office drops. The 67% decline was attributed by Deadline Hollywood to the bad word of mouth on the film and its CinemaScore grade. At the same time, Intelligence saw more than a 17% downsize of available seats for the film, resulting in fewer showtimes, which also led to the decline. 99. In its third weekend, the film earned $31.6 million, contributing to the $800 million mark at the box office to become Hollywood's second highest-grossing film released during the pandemic behind No Way Home. 100. The film earned $16.4 million in its fourth weekend, contributing to the total box office that helped it to become the highest-grossing film of 2022, previously held by The Batman. 101. As of June 2022, the film stands as the 11th highest-grossing of the MCU worldwide. 102. In 2023, a majority of the superhero films released, such as Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, The Flash, Blue Beetle, The Marvels, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, were moderate commercial failures. Only two superhero films released that year, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Spider-Man: Across the Spider-Verse, performed well at the box office, grossing $845 million and $690 million respectively, turning a profit alongside positive reviews from audiences and critics. 103. In February 2024, Sony released its fourth film in the Spider-Man universe, Madam Web. The film was panned by critics and underperformed at the box office. 104. In July, the MCU's first film of the year, Deadpool and Wolverine, was also its first R-rated film. It was Hugh Jackman's first X-Men film since 2017's Logan and Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool's MCU debut. The film was highly acclaimed and grossed over $1.33 billion worldwide, making it the 20th highest-grossing film of all time, the highest-grossing R-rated film of all time, and the second highest-grossing film of 2024. 105. 106. Warner Bros.' Joker, Folie à Deux, a sequel to the 2019 film, Joker, was released in October 2024. Joaquin Phoenix reprised his role as the Joker and Lady Gaga made her superhero film debut as Harley Quinn. Joker, Folie à Deux was followed by Sony Spider-Man Universe films Venom, The Last Dance in November 2024, and Kraven the Hunter in December 2024, 107. In February 2025, Captain America, Brave New World was released to moderately poor reviews by critics, and to date has the fourth lowest box office earnings of any MCU movie, 108. 109. Economic importance. Since the 2010s, superhero films have played a significant role in the film industry. According to The Hollywood Reporter, with rare exception, even A-plus stars aren't making what they used to, making superhero films one of the last ways for an actor to earn a major payday. They write that if an actor wants to get paid, they have to put on a cape, and that characters like Spider-Man and Batman are more important than the actors themselves. 110. Since 2022, superhero films, especially from the MCU, have seen more inconsistent performances. The Marvels, 2023, had the worst box office outcome for an MCU film since 2008's The Incredible Hulk, amid a broader trend of box office disappointments for superhero films. 111. Fans, critics, and actors alike have pointed to cultural fatigue and the exhaustion of well-used storylines to explain this sudden dip in earnings and popularity. 112. On the other hand, director Joe Russo has suggested a generational divide in media consumption driving declining box office performances. 113. Animated superhero films have also achieved critical and financial success. 114. 115. While animated superhero films are typically direct-to-video, a number have been released theatrically. In 1968, VIP My Brother Superman, a parody of the superhero genre. 116, directed by Italian animator Bruno Bazzetto, was a financial success. 117. Batman, Mask of the Phantasm, which was released theatrically in 1993, was a critical success, though a box office failure. 118. In 2004, Pixar released The Incredibles, a film about a retired superhero couple and their children. It did well critically and financially, and went on to win an Academy Award. In 2010, DreamWorks Animation released Megamind to middling success. 119. In 2014, Walt Disney Animation Studios released an adaptation of the Marvel superhero Teen Big Hero 6. The same year, Warner Brothers released the Lego Movie, with Batman and other DC superheroes in leading and supporting roles. As a significant box office success, it was followed in 2017 by the Lego Batman movie and DreamWorks Animation's Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. Citation needed. In 2018, 3 theatrical animated superhero films were released to critical and commercial success: Pixar's Incredibles 2, Warner Brothers' Teen Titans Go! To the Movies, and Sony Pictures Animation's Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse. Into the Spider-Verse swept that year's major film awards for animated features, including the Academy Award. 120, a sequel to Spider-Man. Into the Spider-Verse came out in 2023, titled Spider-Man, Across the Spider-Verse. Another Spider-Verse sequel, Spider-Man, Beyond the Spider-Verse, is currently in production and scheduled to be released in 2027. 121. Criticism. As the number of superhero films being produced increased during the latter part of the 2010s, the genre's contribution to cinema was questioned. In a 2019 interview with Empire magazine, American filmmaker Martin Scorsese commented, "The closest I can think of them, as well made as they are, with actors doing the best they can under the circumstances, is steampunks. It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being." He stated the Marvel Cinematic Universe was not cinema. 122. He later added that he was worried about studios' dependence on the format because in many places around this country and the world, franchise films are now your primary choice if you want to see something on the big screen. It's a perilous time in film exhibition, and there are fewer independent theaters than ever. 123. Although in later years, various actors and creators from the MCU, including the Russo brothers and Robert Downey Jr., criticized the filmmaker's comments claiming Scorsese is jealous. Criticism of Marvel Studios' films continued, with Jennifer Aniston stating that Marvel movies are diminishing. Denis Villeneuve dismissed too many Marvel films as being a cut and paste of others, 124, and Roland Emmerich stated large blockbuster films such as the MCU and Star Wars movies were ruining our industry a little, since nobody does anything original anymore. 125. Grant Morrison, writer and co-creator of the All-Star Superman comic series, wonders whether the superhero genre can legitimately be classified as a film genre. They reflect that the idea of a superhuman is malleable and has been used in many other genres, like westerns and detective stories. They goes on to explain. Writer Alan Moore, a veteran of the comics industry known for his work on Watchmen, V for Vendetta, Batman, The Killing Joke, and From Hell, has expressed criticism of modern superhero movies in general, which he once called a blight to cinema and also to culture to a degree. He said in an October 2022 interview with The Guardian that the popularization of the genre on the part of adults is an infantilization that can act as a precursor to fascism. Lamenting at how deeply such films became part of the culture, Moore commented frowny face 129, 130. I will always love and adore the comics medium, but the comics industry and all of the stuff attached to it just became unbearable. Hundreds of thousands of adults, lining up to see characters and situations that had been created to entertain the 12-year-old boys, and it was always boys, of 50 years ago. I didn't think that superheroes were adult fare. I think that this was a misunderstanding born of what happened in the 1980s, to which I must put my hand up to a considerable share of the blame, though it was not intentional, when things like Watchmen were first appearing. There were an awful lot of headlines saying, comics have grown up. I tend to think that, no, comics hadn't grown up. There were a few titles that were more adult than people were used to. But the majority of comics titles were pretty much the same as they'd ever been. It wasn't comics growing up. I think it was more comics meeting the emotional age of the audience coming the other way. By the 2020s, superhero fatigue emerged to describe audience weariness with formulaic superhero films, reflected in declining box office returns and mixed reviews. In particular, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been criticized for oversaturating the market with its expansion to streaming beginning with Phase 4, prompting Marvel Studios to rethink its annual output. In 1908, the Daily Telegraph printed an article in the form of an interview with Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany that damaged Anglo-German relations and added to international tensions in the build-up to World War I. In 1928, the son of Baron Burnham, Harry Lawson Webster Levi Lawson, 2nd Baron Burnham, sold the paper to William Barry, 1st Viscount Camrose, in partnership with his brother Gomer Barry, 1st Viscount Kemsley and Edward Alife, 1st Baron Alife. In 1937, the newspaper absorbed the Morning Post, which traditionally espoused a conservative position and sold predominantly amongst the retired officer class. Originally William Ewart Barry, 1st Viscount Camrose, bought the Morning Post with the intention of publishing it alongside the Daily Telegraph, but poor sales of the former led him to merge the two. For some years, the paper was retitled the Daily Telegraph and Morning Post before it reverted to just the Daily Telegraph. In the late 1930s, Victor Gordon Lennox, the Telegraph's diplomatic editor, published an anti-appeasement private newspaper, the Whitehall Letter, that received much of its information from leaks from Sir Robert Vansittart, the permanent Under-Secretary of the Foreign Office, and Rex Leeper, the Foreign Office's press secretary. 24. As a result, Gordon Lennox was monitored by MI5. 24. In 1939, the Telegraph published Claire Hollingworth's scoop that Germany was to invade Poland. In November 1940, Fleet Street, with its close proximity to the river and docklands, was subjected to almost daily bombing raids by the Luftwaffe, and the Telegraph started printing in Manchester at Kemsley House, now the Printworks entertainment venue, which was run by Camrose's brother Kemsley. Manchester quite often printed the entire run of the Telegraph when its Fleet Street offices were under threat. The name Kemsley House was changed to Thomson House in 1959. In 1986, printing of northern editions of the Daily and Sunday Telegraph moved to Trafford Park, and in 2008 to newsprinters at Knowsley, Liverpool. During the Second World War, the Daily Telegraph covertly helped in the recruitment of codebreakers for Bletchley Park. The ability to solve the Telegraph's crossword in under 12 minutes was considered to be a recruitment test. The newspaper was asked to organize a crossword competition, after which each of the successful participants was contacted and asked if they would be prepared to undertake a particular type of work as a contribution to the war effort. The competition itself was won by F. H. W. Hawes of Dagenham, who finished the crossword in less than 8 minutes. Canadian businessman Conrad Black, through companies controlled by him, bought the Telegraph Group in 1986. Black, through his holding company Ravelston Corporation, owned 78% of Hollinger Incorporated, which in turn owned 30% of Hollinger International. Hollinger International in turn owned the Telegraph Group and other publications such as the Chicago Sun-Times, the Jerusalem Post, and the Spectator. On January 18, 2004, Black was dismissed as chairman of the Hollinger International Board over allegations of financial wrongdoing. Black was also sued by the company. Later that day, it was reported that the Buckley brothers had agreed to purchase Black's 78% interest in Hollinger Incorporated for £245 million, giving them a controlling interest in the company, and to buy out the minority shareholders later. However, a lawsuit was filed by the Hollinger International Board to try to block Black from selling his shares in Hollinger Incorporated until an investigation into his dealings was completed. Black filed a countersuit, but, eventually, United States Judge Leo Strine sided with the Hollinger International Board and blocked Black from selling his Hollinger Incorporated shares to the twins. On March 7, 2004, the twins announced that they were launching another bid, this time just for the Daily Telegraph and its Sunday sister paper rather than all of Hollinger Incorporated. The then owner of the Daily Express, Richard Desmond, was also interested in purchasing the paper, selling his interest in several pornographic magazines to finance the initiative. Desmond withdrew in March 2004, when the price climbed above £600 (28), as did Daily Mail and General Trust plc a few months later on 17 June, 29. Since 2004. In November 2004, the Telegraph celebrated the 10th anniversary of its website, Electronic Telegraph, now renamed www.telegraph.co.uk. The Electronic Telegraph launched in 1995 with the Daily Telegraph Guide to the Internet, citation needed, by writer Sue Schofield for an annual charge of £180. On May 8, 2006, the first stage of a major redesign of the website took place, with a wider page layout and greater prominence for audio, video, and journalist blogs. On October 10, 2005, the Daily Telegraph relaunched to incorporate a tabloid sports section and a new standalone business section. The Daily Mail's star columnist and political analyst Simon Heffer left that paper in October 2005 to rejoin the Daily Telegraph, where he has become associate editor. Heffer has written 2 columns a week for the paper since late October 2005 and is a regular contributor to the news podcast. In November 2005, the first regular podcast service by a newspaper in the UK was launched. Just before Christmas 2005, it was announced that the Telegraph titles would be moving from Canada Place in Canary Wharf to new offices at Victoria Plaza at 111 Buckingham Palace Road near Victoria Station in central London. 31. The new office features a hub-and-spoke layout for the newsroom to produce content for print and online editions. In October 2006, with its relocation to Victoria, the company was renamed the Telegraph Media Group, repositioning itself as a multimedia company. On September 2, 2008, the Daily Telegraph was printed with color on each page for the first time when it left West Ferry for newsprinters at Broxbourne, Hertfordshire, another arm of the Murdoch Company. 32. The paper is also printed in Liverpool and Glasgow by newsprinters. In May 2009, the daily and Sunday editions published details of MPs' expenses. This led to a number of high-profile resignations from both the ruling Labour administration and the Conservative opposition. Accusation of news coverage influenced by advertisers. In July 2014, the Daily Telegraph was criticized for carrying links on its website to pro-Kremlin articles supplied by a Russian state-funded publication that downplayed any Russian involvement in the downing of the passenger jet Malaysia Airlines Flight 1738. These had featured on its website as part of a commercial deal, but were later removed. 39. As of 2014, Needs Update, the paper was paid £900,000 a year to include the supplement Russia Beyond the Headlines, a publication sponsored by the Rossiyskaya Gazeta, the Russian government's official newspaper. 40. In February 2015, the chief political commentator of the Daily Telegraph, Peter Olborn, resigned. Olborn accused the paper of a form of fraud on its readers. 41. For its coverage of the bank HSBC in relation to a Swiss tax dodging scandal that was widely covered by other news media. He alleged that editorial decisions about news content had been heavily influenced by the advertising arm of the newspaper because of commercial interests. 42. Jay Rosen at New York University stated that Olborn's resignation statement was one of the most important things a journalist has written about journalism lately. 42. Olborn cited other instances of advertising strategy influencing the content of articles, linking the refusal to take an editorial stance on the repression of democratic demonstrations in Hong Kong to the Telegraph's support from China. Additionally, he said that favorable reviews of the Cunard cruise liner Queen Mary II appeared in the Telegraph, noting, on May 10 last year the Telegraph ran a long feature on Cunard's Queen Mary II liner on the news review page. This episode looked to many like a plug for an advertiser on a page normally dedicated to serious news analysis. I again checked and certainly Telegraph competitors did not view Cunard's liner as a major news story. Cunard is an important Telegraph advertiser. 41. In response, the Telegraph called Olborn's statement an astonishing and unfounded attack, full of inaccuracy and innuendo. 42. Later that month, Telegraph editor Chris Evans invited journalists at the newspaper to contribute their thoughts on the issue. 43. Press Gazette reported later in 2015 that Olborn had joined the Daily Mail tabloid newspaper and the Telegraph had issued new guidelines over the way editorial and commercial staff worked together. 44. In January 2017, the Telegraph Media Group had a higher number of health complaints than any other UK newspaper by its regulator IPSO, 45. Most of these findings pertain to inaccuracy, as with other UK newspapers, 46. In October 2017, a number of major Western news organizations whose coverage had irked Beijing were excluded from Xi Jinping's speech event launching a new Politburo. However, the Daily Telegraph had been granted an invitation to the event, 47. In April 2019, Business Insider reported the Telegraph had partnered with Facebook to publish articles, downplaying techno fears and praising the company. 48. Premature obituaries. The paper published premature obituaries for Cocky Hooptrope when the second wife of Baron Blixen, 49, Dave Swarbrick in 1999, 49, and Dorothy Southworth Ritter, the widow of Tex Ritter and mother of John Ritter, in August 2001, 49. Accusation of anti-Semitism. Editors for both the Daily Telegraph and the Sunday Telegraph have been criticized by Guardian columnist Owen Jones for publishing and authoring articles which espouse cultural Marxism, an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. 50. In 2018, Alistair Heath, the editor of the Sunday Telegraph, wrote that cultural Marxism is running rampant. 51. Assistant comment editor of the Daily Telegraph Sherelle Jacobs also used the term in 2019. 52. The Daily Telegraph also published an anonymous civil servant who stated, "There is a strong presence of Anglophobia, combined with cultural Marxism that runs through the civil service." 53. False allegations of Islamic extremism. In January 2019, the paper published an article written by Camilla Tominey titled, "Police Called In After Scout Group Run from Mosque is Linked to Islamic Extremist and Holocaust Denier." 54, in which it was reported that the police were investigating Ahmed Hussein, the leader of the scout group at the Lewisham Islamic Center, because he had links to extremist Muslim groups that promoted terrorism and anti-Semitism. In January 2020, the paper issued an official apology and accepted that the article contained many falsehoods, and that Hussein had never supported or promoted terrorism or been anti-Semitic. The paper paid Hussein damages and costs, 55, in a letter sent to Hussein's lawyers accompanying the text of their published apology. The newspaper's lawyers wrote, "The article was published by our client following receipt of information in good faith from the SCAV Association and the Henry Jackson Society. Nevertheless, our client now accepts that the article, using that expression to refer to both print and online versions, is defamatory of your client and will apologize to him for publishing it." 56. China Watch. In 2016, the Hong Kong Free Press reported that the Daily Telegraph was receiving £750,000 annually to carry a supplement called China Watch as part of a commercial deal with Chinese state-run newspaper China Daily. 57. The Guardian reported in 2018 that the China Watch supplement was being carried by the Telegraph along with other newspapers of record such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Le Figaro. 58. The Telegraph published the supplement once a month in print, and published it. In January 2021, the British press regulator, the Independent Press Standards Organisation, ordered the Daily Telegraph to publish a correction to two significantly misleading claims in a comment article published by Toby Young. The July 2020 article, "When We Have Herd Immunity, Boris will face a reckoning on this pointless and damaging lockdown," which spread COVID-19 misinformation that the common cold provided natural immunity to COVID-19 and that London was probably approaching herd immunity. 62, 63. The regulator said that a correction was appropriate rather than a more serious response due to the level of scientific uncertainty at the time the comment was published. 63. At the time of the ruling, The Telegraph had removed the comment article but had not issued a correction. 63. Climate change. The Telegraph has published multiple columns and news articles which promote pseudoscientific views on climate change, and misleadingly cast the subject of climate change as a subject of active scientific debate when there is a scientific consensus on climate change. 70. It has published columns about the conspiracy behind the anthropogenic global warming myth, 67. Described climate scientists as white-coated prima donnas and narcissists, 67, 68, and claims that global warming causes about as much damage as benefits. 69. In 2015, a Telegraph News article incorrectly claimed that scientists predicted a mini-ice age by 2030. 68. Climate change-denying journalist James Dealenpole was first to use climate date on his Telegraph blog for a manufactured controversy where emails were leaked from climate scientists ahead of the Copenhagen Climate Summit and misleadingly presented to give the appearance that the climate scientists were engaged in fraud. 71. In 2014, The Telegraph was one of several media titles to give evidence to the House of Commons Select Committee, Communicating Climate Science. The paper told MPs they believe climate change is happening and humans play a role in it. Editors told the committee, "We believe that the climate is changing, that the reason for that change includes human activity, but that human ingenuity and adaptability should not be ignored in favor of economically damaging prescriptions." The Daily Telegraph, in particular its columnist and former editor Charles Moore, were staunch supporters of Owen Paterson, a former MP and minister who resigned after it was found that he had breached advocacy rules to lobby ministers for fees. A plan to overhaul the Commons Standard and spare Paterson from being suspended and a possible recall petition that follows was leaked to the newspaper, and it was approvingly splashed across the paper's front page. Boris Johnson flew back from the COP26 summit in Glasgow to attend a Telegraph journalists' reunion at the Garrick and left the club with more the same evening. 75. Additional citations needed. 2023 to 2024 takeover bid. In June 2023, The Guardian and other newspapers reported that, following a breakdown in discussions relating to a financial dispute, Lloyds Bank was planning to take control of the companies owning the Telegraph titles and The Spectator and sell them off. 76, 77. Representatives of the Buckley family have described the reports as irresponsible. 78. By October 20, a sale of the publications had been initiated after bankers seized control. Lloyds appointed receivers and started shopping the brands to bidders. 79. By November, it was revealed that the bid had been agreed upon by Redbird IMI, a joint venture between Redbird Capital Partners and International Media Investments, a firm based in the United Arab Emirates and owned by Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan. The bid would see the firm take over the Telegraph, while allowing the Buckley family to repay a debt of £1.2 billion to Lloyds Bank. Conservative MPs raised national security concerns and pushed the government to investigate the bid, as the United Arab Emirates had a poor reputation for freedom of speech. 80, 81, 82. Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser issued a public interest intervention notice on 30 November, 83, preventing the group from taking over without further scrutiny from the media regulator Ofcom over potential breaches of media standards. 84, 85. Conservative MPs also called on Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden to use the National Security and Investment Act 2021 to investigate the Emirati-backed bid. 86. Chairman Andrew Neil threatened to quit if the sale was approved, saying, "You cannot have a major mainstream newspaper group owned by an undemocratic government or dictatorship where no one has a vote." 87. Fraser Nelson, editor of The Spectator, which would be included in the sale, also opposed the move, saying, "The very reason why a foreign government would want to buy a sensitive asset is the very reason why a national government should be wary of selling them." 88. In March 2024, the Lords voted in a new law, under which restrictions were imposed on foreign governments regarding the ownership of British newspapers and magazines, including only being allowed up to a 0.1% stake, 89/90. In April 2024, the UK government effectively banned Redbird IMI from taking over the Telegraph and the Spectator by introducing new laws which prevented foreign governments from owning British newspapers. Redbird also confirmed it would withdraw its takeover plans, saying they were no longer feasible. 91. In April 2024, Redbird IMI confirmed to put up the Telegraph for sale again and to begin open auction. However, the Abu Dhabi Fund suggested that it seek to recoup the £600 million it spent acquiring the newspaper, while will otherwise retain some involvement. 92. The Telegraph was left in limbo, as the staff remained blocked from taking strategic decisions. 93. The owner of the New York Sun, David Afyon, came up as a leading bidder, but struggled to take over the paper. The Columbia Journalism Review dubbed it as the newspaper auction from hell. 94/95. On January 17, 2025, David Castelblanco, a partner at the Abu Dhabi fund Redbird, urged the Telegraph to make significant job cuts, including over 100 non-editorial roles. He also advised the executives to halt planned editorial investments, which included expansions of the U.S. newsroom. The intervention was likely to raise concerns